Welcome to TandTeaching, the educational podcast you can listen to with a cup of tea. I'm Arthur Moore, and I'm getting ready to go to the Inner Drive and Eton Teaching and Learning Summit 2024 tomorrow. That's what this pod is going to be all about. We're going to give you some little snippets into the day, hear from some of the speakers. Amy is coming along with us today, and she'll be giving us summaries of all the sessions with all her key takeaways, and basically just going to try and give you a feel of what it was like at the Inner Drive and Eton Teaching and Learning Summit 2024. So next time you hear our voices, we'll be in the car bright and early on a Saturday morning off to Eton. So we are en route to Eton for the Inner Drive and Eton Teaching and Learning Conference 2024. I'm with my chauffeur today. It's not Mike Carroll this year. You could argue that I've upgraded. So, Amy, how's the chauffeuring going?
It's a thrill a minute. This is what I live for.
It really is.
Driving you around the country.
So, we're not far away. Anything particular you're looking forward to today?
Well, I am ready and raring to go. I've got my notebook, my Post-its, lots of different colour pens, all the stationery, ready to record some mini thoughts on all the sessions today. Lots of really good speakers on the lineup. So yeah, just looking forward to getting started.
That's how we're going to divvy it up today, isn't it? I'm going to go and speak to the speakers and the attendees and everyone, and you're going to sit quietly in the corner making notes, getting your mini thoughts ready. Correct?
I'm going to be the teaching and learning geek in the corner. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, let's get going. Drive. So we've just had a session from Jonnie and Iro from Eton. Amy, do you want to give us a quick summary of what the session was all about?
Yeah, so their session was titled Academic Success, Employability Skills, Well-Rounded Individuals. And they were talking a lot about, I think, what we used to sort of call soft skills. Those things that employers are looking for, and just thinking about how we consciously teach these kind of interpersonal and leadership skills to our students in school.
Yeah, I really like what Jonnie was talking about with kind of how they use their links with businesses to get people in to talk to the students, so the students can talk to people who have actually gone and done it. And then when I catch up with Jonnie later, or I try and grab him for a recording later, I'm going to ask him kind of like how other schools can do that and how we can go about that process. For you, we've just finished the session. I was wondering what the kind of Amy's mini thought is really as that session ends.
I think one thing that stood out to me that I actually quite liked that both Jonnie and Iro acknowledged was there is so much for schools to do. They talked a lot about how, all of this sort of the character building that we do with our students, teaching them leadership skills, interpersonal skills, along with, like metacognition and all these it sort of sometimes feels like we're adding just to a long list of things that we have to do as schools. But actually, these are the things that are going to help our students go on and be successful in the world of work. So especially, talking about how to collaborate with employers, and they also mentioned this kind of interdisciplinary approach in schools. I know we talk about like intercurricular or cross-curricular stuff, but actually how those can be really great opportunities to teach our students some of these other skills that they're going to need.
I think the final thing I'd point out is they spoke at the end about the Eton X online courses that they offered to state schools completely for free. Yeah. I know we've then gone and had a little look, and that looks something really interesting.
Great. Yeah.
So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, like just Google Eton X.
Eton X.
So looking forward to that. Anyway, I think we should get on to the next session.
Okay, so we've just come out of our second session with Lucy Crehan.
Friend of the pod,
get that in. So her session was titled Creation and Movement of Teacher Knowledge, Lessons from East Asia. What did you think of the session, Arthur?
Well, I'm a big fan of Lucy's work. I think her book Clever Lands, which I know a lot of people have read, is absolutely brilliant. And as I mentioned, a friend of the pod. So if you want to hear more about that, go and listen to our full episode with Lucy. I love how she was talking about kind of there's pedagogical knowledge and then there's subject-specific content knowledge, and quite often we teach those two things individually to our teachers, and what we need to do is kind of combine those two. If you imagine that kind of Venn diagram that I can see is noted in mine in your notes, and something as a maths teacher that really resonates with me, because, and I know maths teachers say this a lot in trainings, how does this apply to my subject? Well, if we're straight away talking about your subject and how pedagogy is going to go with that, we get rid of that kind of question straight away. What about for you?
Yeah, no, I can completely agree with that. I'd love that to have been part of my training as well. Not just like, here's the structure of a lesson, but specifically, if you're teaching a poetry lesson or whatever. So Lucy went through kind of three sort of main lessons, I guess, that she'd learned from some of her time in specifically schools in Singapore that she talked about a lot. One of the things that I sort of noted as key takeaway was the benefits of joint planning. That she talked about, how this was actually just part of kind of the culture of the schools in East Asia that she visited, and in other brilliant educational settings like Finland as well. We know how beneficial that can be. You've got sharing knowledge throughout teachers, helping to manage workload. It's that continued teacher improvement that's led and supported by peers as well. I guess the trick or the pickle for us in the UK is just to figure out how we can manage that with timetables, so that we could take more advantage of that sort of pedagogical training for teachers.
Is that going to be a new area, the pod Amy's Pickles, or is that no? Right, on to the next one. So we've just finished our first couple of speakers. We've heard from Jonnie and Iro from Eton, and friend of the pod Lucy Crehan, which is just absolutely fascinating. The buzz here is brilliant right now. I'm sure you've heard a bit of the buzz. I'm going to go and try and grab some of the speakers, get them to talk about their sessions. Right, I'm here with Jonnie from Eton. Jonnie, thank you so much for your talk to kick off the Teacher and Learning Summit today.
Thank you very much for being here today again.
An absolute pleasure as always. So you spoke about a lot, can't go into it all. People have to go and watch the recordings, but you spoke about kind of building a ambitious culture within your school, and how you start that with your boarders, and that kind of all trickles down. Something from my experience and a lot of teachers' experience is kind of having that ambitious culture is really difficult. I was just wondering if, from kind of your experience, if you have any kind of top tips for schools who are like, how do I build that ambition in my students and within the culture of our school?
I think so much of it is about taking away barriers that aren't real barriers. Sometimes students limit themselves, they limit their horizons, what they think they can achieve. And if you can show them those barriers aren't real, that's really helpful. Role models of people who've broken those barriers in the past and come back and say, look, I did this, you can do it too. It's fantastic. What that does is it alters their perception of what's possible, and that's central to building an ambitious culture.
I love that. And having role models which the students in their context can understand and can relate to. And you spoke about kind of reaching out to organisations and stuff like that. Is that as simple as schools as just go and ask, just send those emails, go and knock on some doors, or any kind of ways to kind of get into those organisations that we need to know about?
You can do it through local partnerships if they exist. So, for instance, I referenced a partnership in Leeds called the AHEAD Partnership, and they work bringing schools and employers together in the local area. If that doesn't exist in your area, you can, of course, begin to set one up yourself. And really, it is just about approaching employers, many of whom are very willing to do this kind of work with schools.
No, absolutely, Jonnie. Thank you again for talking, and thank you for hosting the day at Eton. Absolutely awesome day, enjoying it so far.
Thank you.
I'm here with friend of the pod and fellow Teach First, I always shout out Teach First, Lucy Crehan. Lucy, how's your day been?
Awesome, loved it. So many good speakers.
So many good speakers,
so much.
of which you were one,
Yes.
obviously. I just want to point out one thing about your session. You were talking about kind of, in some countries they have like teaching guides that a teacher will literally have in front of them, which I just think is such a brilliant and kind of intriguing idea. And I was just wondering if, say, a head of department's listening to this and is going like, yeah, I actually really would like that. Is there a good place to start with creating a teacher guide? Is it good to start with a topic or a specific lesson, or anything from there?
Yeah, so just for listeners, in case they haven't heard of what the teacher guides are, I was in a case of where I was referring to Singapore, where this teacher had a double page spread, and it wasn't a step-by-step lesson plan. None of it was telling the teacher what to do or in any way compulsory, but it was some kind of suggested or guidance around, here's some activities you could try, here's some useful analogies, good ways of explaining, hinge questions, extension activities, etc. And it really is it's the pooled expertise of all the teachers in the department, in the school, and actually often in East Asia they work across schools with districts as well. So I would, in terms of actually creating one of those within your own school, or I would, if possible, if you're a part of a network of schools, I would suggest don't only do it with a single school, but gather that expertise from across the trust or across the network or across the local authority. Would be to, ideally in person, sit down and talk about it, starting with a topic and addressing like all of your science teachers, for example, and say, right, well, how do you find that the best way of teaching electric circuits is? What analogies do you use? What are the misconceptions that you often see with your students? And just pull it all. So you pull it all into one resource, and then just take your time over it. You can't produce it all in one go, but however often you're able to have a meeting, do another topic, and then eventually you'll end up, work your way through a curriculum, so that by the end of it you do have a book that actually covers the whole of your curriculum with some really, that wisdom gathered from your collective staff all in one place.
It was just something that really resonated with me as a maths teacher. Sometimes I'd love to have that kind of, because we get asked big questions sometimes, and I'd love to have those little guides from people who've taught these much longer and much more detailed. Just like, oh, sir, what about this? And I can be like, well, I don't know, but give me a moment, bang, there's an answer to that question.
And they're the kind of things that you get those little snippets, don't you, from your colleagues, but it's by chance because you happen to be talking about it with them in the staff room, or you happen to go and ask, oh, I'm stuck with this thing. But this, rather than leaving those shared ideas to chance, this is kind of systemising it a bit. It's less creative, maybe, it's less exciting than waiting for those chance encounters, but it does mean that you end up pooling that knowledge. I think that's really productive.
Which can only be a good thing.
Exactly.
Lucy, thank you so much for your time. Absolutely loved this speech today. I'm here with a friend of the pod, Singh. Singh, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, buddy. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Really looking forward to your talk, which is about to kick off any moment now, just to build up the nerves, buddy, just to build up the nerves. Do you want to give us a quick insight into kind of what you're going to be talking about and what you hope people are going to take away from your awesome talk?
Sure. So I'm going to try and pack 6 years worth of learning and thinking into 22 minutes, and not a second over, I'm told. So looking at like this like massive idea of interleaving, like how I got into it, all of the mistakes that I made, and still sometimes get wrong. Like it's just really tricky, and how people might like navigate it in their own context, I guess.
And are people going to go away thinking they've got something they can go and implement next week, or is it kind of these longer-term strategical ideas? It's
always a difficult question, right? Because as teachers, you inherently want the best for your students, and you want the best yesterday, right? So you want to get good ideas, you want to get them yesterday. But like, what I'm hoping is that in sharing some of the mistakes I made, people take that longer-term approach. Like, actually, it's better to slow it down and get it right than to rush it and get it wrong, because it's really hard to recover from that point. So yeah, that longer term, let's think about this and get it right first time around.
No, I'm really looking forward to it, buddy. One of my favourite speakers, so I'm absolutely buzzing for it. You'll absolutely smash it, don't worry.
Appreciate that.
So we had our break, and then we're straight back into the hall for another friend of the pod, Amarbeer Singh Gill's session. Amarbeer, just a brilliant speaker. I love listening to his speak. I went to his speech at Research Ed, which was just brilliant. I know you haven't been to an Amarbeer kind of presentation before, so Amy, kind of go straight in. What was it about? What did you take away from it?
Yeah, absolutely loved it. So Amarbeer's session was called "Why I Got Interleaving Wrong and How to Avoid My Mistakes," and I loved this session for just how relatable it is. Like, oh, here's this sort of new thing in education. Go try it with, very little sort of plan or sort of like concrete steps in place. Perhaps I know a lot of teachers have, been there, done that. We've got things wrong a lot of the time. So yeah, really relatable, but also a really practical session. One of the questions that I wrote down, which I really loved, was Amarbeer was talking about variation theory. And a question he asked was, what related concepts exist in my subject, and are students likely to mix them up? So this idea that actually you should be drawing attention to the connections across your subject as part of interleaving and helping students to understand those connections. But obviously as teachers, it's a great idea for us to plan those things first, consider where those links can be made so that we can increase our students' understanding and show them how these concepts work across our subjects.
I've got nothing more to add. It was an absolute brilliant session.
Such a good session.
If you're ever at a conference and Singh is speaking, go to it because he is awesome. Right. Let's keep going. Who have we got next?
Oh, we've got the big dog, Bradley Busch.
Big dog. Oh, God. Right. Let's go.
Okay, so we've just come out of a session run by Bradley Busch titled Recent Research You Need to Know. Now, this is Inner Drive's whole
shebang
mission, is to get research out there for teachers. So Bradley went through some studies on retrieval practice, feedback, and use of PowerPoints in lessons. What was your biggest takeaway from Brad's session?
Firstly, I point out friend of the pod. I'm going to keep mentioning it. I've never actually used PowerPoint to deliver a single session in my entire teaching career.
It's quite a difficult one for maths, maybe.
I see it used a lot in maths, but I've never used it. But for me, it was when he was talking about multiple choices. I love things that can make a big difference, but really take no real input. What does that say about me?
Lazy teacher.
But he was talking about multiple choice questions and just the difference of you ask a question and before you give the multiple choice, you just ask people to think of what their answer is and then you still give them the multiple choice answer. And that tiny little gap, that little thing you can do just makes such a huge difference in the whole learning process. So that's something I'm going to take away straight away and I can implement in my sessions tomorrow. Love that. What about you?
Yeah, I absolutely love that work. Just it seems so simple, does it? Like, we spoke to Brad at one point and was like, how did I not think of this? How, it seems so simple. Like, ask the question as a retrieval, like free recall first before you provide the multiple choice. Some of the stuff I wrote down was about feedback. Brad talking a lot about sort of how do we make feedback effective and what things do we need to think about with it. And I liked this idea of like setting targets with your students as part of feedback. So, we're always telling students, well, this is what you need to do next. This is how you get to the next bit. But Brad pointed out that some of the research suggests you should be highlighting the improvements that students have already made as a motivator to their next step. Which I loved because I think sometimes otherwise for our students it can just feel like, the next bit, without that sort of like pause in the moment to acknowledge the good work that they've done so far.
And what was it? I remember that bit because I was thinking like when I go like running, for example, there's no point me a time or a distance if I don't know how fast or how far I've run previously. I've got no reference to it. So that was something that was like, it's one of those kind of, it obviously makes sense, but it only makes sense once you really think about it and it's something you can put into your teaching.
Because I think we do, like you would say to a student, wouldn't you? Well, this has gone well in this piece of work or in this, exam practice, but I think just making more of a sort of praise point of that, especially if we want to motivate particular types of students.
It's something I've done in maths before, where just when we've come to the end of a topic or an end of a review or something, just go, oh, by the way, here's the first question I gave you on this topic. Look at what we can now do compared to what you couldn't do at the start. And you see the students go, oh yeah, like even if I'm finding where we are tricky, I'm way ahead of what I can actually do.
That moment of, oh, I can do it.
Right.
Great session.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. Right, really looking forward to the next one, so let's get back to our sets. So we've just had a session with Sarah-Jayne Blakemore, who I will admit is one of the authors of one of my favourite ever edu books. So, cut more like, what do you think? What was it about?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. So Sarah-Jayne's session was called Understanding the Teenage Brain. The mysteries, perhaps, of the teenage brain made clear to us in this session.
Clearer.
She was talking about this as a sort of really sensitive period of brain development. I think the fact she said as well, this is between age 10 and 24 is what they class as adolescence in terms of the development of the brain. And she also then talked about sort of risk perception. I think we as teachers, you can often see perhaps how young adolescents become more influenced by their peers than they do by their adults. You know, their friendship group becomes everything, like especially working in secondary schools, we see how significant a friendship group can be. And that Sarah-Jayne was also talking about how teenagers or adolescents are hypersensitive to social exclusion. So actually it's safer for, you know, our secondary age students to go along with the group, because that actually protects them more than if they stand out as sort of rejecting something or going against an idea, even if that's in a, you know, a difficult or a slightly dangerous situation.
One thing I thought was really interesting when she was talking was she was saying like how teenagers take risks, and we like that. That's actually a really positive thing. But quite often I think in class we kind of perceive our students to be sometimes, or I do, sometimes risk averse with putting their hand up, like giving an answer. And what Sarah really made me think about was, for them, they're still, the risky option is to get something wrong socially.
Yeah. Or so, just to be that person that speaks first.
Yeah. So to actually, like, they're not being risky. Like, they're actually being the thing that we don't think they're being, because they're just their whole way of thinking is flipped to do with, it's all about their friendship groups. Yeah. And I think that's something sometimes we forget, especially in those secondary years and secondary teachers, know those years.
Yeah, I think what I loved with her talking about risk perception in teenagers, though, is how we can so often see that as a negative, like, oh, they get involved in drinking or smoking or dangerous driving or whatever. But Sarah-Jayne actually turned that around and said, actually, let's use that risk-taking behaviour to their advantage. Let's use it for positive outcomes. Let's get them engaged in more peer-led activities, because their peer group is so important at this age. So much can be done through like peer-led support. You know, we can encourage students to trying something new, because they're secondary age students, their brains at this point are hardwired to take risks. And if we can get more of the group involved in taking that risk, then they'll kind of follow everyone along for the ride.
And she remade, when she was talking about positive stuff of it, it's like getting kids involved in kind of peer situations to do with bullying. And this made me think of a session that a pod that we've recorded but not released yet, with the School Consent Project, which is an awesome project, but about how students could like look out for each other as well, and we need to use that kind of peer influence in a positive way, and that's where culture of your school becomes so important. There's so much to dissect from this session that we could do a whole pod just based on this, but honestly, go away and get if you enjoyed any of that or any of our last 2 minutes of chat, go and get a book, because it is sensational.
Yeah, and she's given us loads to think about while we go for our lunch break.
Oh, lunch, let's go.
I'm here with one of the speakers and the host of today, Bradley Busch. Bradley, what a brilliant talk as always, loved it.
Oh, that's very kind of you. What was your favourite part?
I really liked how you were getting us to rethink about our multiple choice strategies. It's something we all do as teachers all the time. We know it's an effective teaching method, but sometimes we just say, oh, if I put up multiple choices, that is good. Yeah. I like how you're kind of going a little bit beyond that. If someone's kind of listening to this and they were like, yes, like, what do you hope they just took away from your talk? What are they leaving this room thinking about?
Yeah, so I guess there's two different levels. The first level is, I think research shouldn't be like this revolution. So some of the studies we cited today are tweaks and additions to what we already know. So we know multiple choice can be really good for retrieval, but can we tweak it slightly to do it a little bit better? We know feedback can really accelerate learning, but what are the mechanisms that can just maximise it? So we're not trying to find magic beans and brand new solutions. It's just tweaks to our practice. So I guess that's the first thing on a structural level, is we're not after revolution, it's kind of evolution. And the second thing, I think for me, one of the things I find most interesting, the study, so I like the one on multiple choice, the one on feedback I find really interesting, is this conflict, I think, in students' brains between focusing on the grade they get and the feedback they're given. And given the choice, I think most people tend to focus on the grade, not the feedback. So what can we do as educators? How do we signal that it's the feedback that's going to accelerate learning? In that study, they gave the feedback before the grades, and I think there's other strategies as well. But I just like that as a concept of signalling what matters, because we know what matters, but can we make that really clear and explicit to the students?
And it's really hard when the students want their grades. When we give back work, they're like, what's my grade? I'm like, no, before we do that, let's focus on the feedback. And is that just about talking to the students and making them understand why you're giving feedback, not grades yet.
Yeah, I think that is a massive part of it. So I think you avoid the confusion if you explain why you're doing it. But what I find really interesting is from talks like Sarah-Jayne Blakemore's is the context of, especially if you're working with teenagers, that desire for social comparison and want to know, how do I fit into the hierarchy of things? Like, there's certain developmental psychology aspects that make teaching really hard, and especially with teenagers, and grades are a great way to work out, how do I sit? Am I smarter than you? Did I do better than you? As opposed to how much did I learn, which is what the feedback focuses on. So I understand why it's challenging for students, but it's also why it's important we get it right.
And that's why it's important that we are talking to our students about all these things that we're learning today. Maybe not as much detail, but we're making them aware of why we're doing stuff, not just we are doing stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I actually think is quite nice about the format of the day, is you can see that all the talks are given in isolation, but you can see how they overlap. So, for example, Jonnie and Iro's talk about, collaborating more with employers is really interesting, because then you listen to someone like Crehan's talk, who talks about the need to carve out time for collaborative teacher development with each other, and you kind of go, well, if we can get some externals in to do some of the stuff around employability, that might actually carve out time where we can then create teacher knowledge in terms of shared lesson planning. So hopefully that's kind of the plan for the day, is hopefully pick and choose and also build on each other's talks.
Yeah, it's all separate, but it's all together, and
Very
we're all kind
nice.
of all going for it together. No, thank you for your time, Brad. We'll talk later, no doubt.
Lovely. Cool.
So I'm here with Sarah-Jayne Blakemore, who's just spoken at the Teaching and Learning Summit and author of one of my favourite educational books. It's absolutely brilliant. Sarah, I have a really quick question, because you were talking about risk with kind of adolescence, and I'm going to go really selfish here and ask a question that I want to know is, one thing I find with my students is they're quite risk adverse when it comes to answering maths questions as a maths teacher. And I was wondering, is there a way I can kind of go away and think about of how I can kind of harness their propensity to take risks and kind of use it in a way that really works for me as a teacher?
Definitely, I've thought about that a lot. Like, this propensity to take risks is there in certain social situations, but it's really not there when it comes to putting up your hand in class and or shouting out an answer or something like that. And I think it's exactly the same issue. It's about peer influence and the effects on peers. Like, the reason why I was talking about peers having a lot of influence on risk-taking in teenagers is because teenagers want to be affiliated with the peer group and don't want to be excluded by it. That's exactly the same reason that some teenagers won't put up their hand in class. They don't want to seem like a geek, or they don't want to get the answer wrong and seem stupid in front of their peers. Again, it all boils down to how they perceive themselves in front of their peers and how they worry about how their peers perceive them.
So, like, the risk is not them not answering the question, the risk is them getting something wrong and then being judged by their peers.
Yeah.
So is it about me kind of make a classroom culture of putting your hand up or answering questions or giving something a go?
I mean, I haven't really ever thought about how you would do this in the classroom, but encouraging, rewarding answering questions in class and trying to get other students to reward it as well somehow. I don't know how you do that, because that's the key thing. You rewarding it alone probably won't make any difference. It's what they really care about is what their peers think of them. So if you can somehow, get the other.
And I think we do sometimes see this. If someone answers something really well, their mate might go, "Oh, you've done really well there," and that means way more than me going
exactly
50 gold stars or something like that. Exactly. So a question that kind of we all can kind of maybe think about and see what works for us in our context with our students.
Yeah, but I think it really is about culture. It's about classroom culture and what is seen as okay, socially permissible, socially cool, and how you get that to be, answering questions in class and putting your hand up and making a guess, for example. That's a risk, isn't it? But it's something that they often are really averse to doing.
Awesome, thank you so much. It's a brilliant talk. Everyone's walked out talking about all that stuff, so that's absolutely brilliant. So, Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, so we've just finished our first session after lunch with Peps McCrea, talking about the mechanics of norms and routines. What do you think of this session?
Absolutely loved it. This is so up my teaching street.
Yeah. I have to say, for me, it made something that could, on the face of it, seem like, routines, it sounds a bit dull. Actually, what I've taken away from this session was, it was really interesting, and he's given me loads to think about.
as a maths teacher, I love routines and procedures
shock
and
me.
processes. I absolutely love them. So it's really interesting when we talk about them as a clear bit, because sometimes I know my early teacher training, build routines. That's what you get to build
Stand
routines.
at the door, say hello, come in.
But sometimes not even that, just build routines, right? Off you go. Whereas what Peps was teaching us is how to really break down how to do that routine and how long it takes different types of routine to be embedded. And what he talked about was like sometimes with a difficult routine, you might actually go backwards to start with, but that's all part of the process. Just a really interesting session. I think it's what I would ask the listeners to do now is really think about the routines that are going on in your lesson, positive and negative, and which ones you want to keep, which ones you want to get rid of, and then go away and do some research about how you can actually do that rather than just jumping in and going for it. That's what Peps really made me think about. What about you?
Yeah, I loved, there was a lot of connection, I thought, as well, between Pep's session and Sarah-Jayne Blakemore's before lunch. They're both talking about like the power of social norms, which I really loved then, those connections between the two. I think for me, the main thing I took away from Pep's session was actually thinking of routines beyond like behaviour and the setup of the classroom. So thinking about perhaps, say, like for me teaching English, how, like, have I established a routine with my students for, let's say, answering a particular exam question? Have I established a routine perhaps around like cold calling or starter activities? So rather than it just being, oh, the routines is what, you know, helps with the behaviour in my classroom, that actually those routines can be broadened to sort of all aspects of teaching. And then once students, you know, anticipate those things, they're going to feel safer, they're going to feel more comfortable with learning.
And also, once you've got those routines established, they're not thinking about the routines because it's routine. So it opens up this whole area of thinking space to think about the questions or the tasks you're getting to do. So they're not just thinking about, oh right, I need to get this pen out of this pot and do stuff like this.
More focus on the lesson content and the skills that they're developing, rather than actually, you know, feeling a bit unsure about just how their lesson's going to go, like what comes next, or what's the expectation when I'm in this room. I'm
going to try and grab Peps later and talk to him about like what's a really good routine to kind of start with, because like some of our classes and schools are challenging places, and to get any routine is a win. So I'm really interested what Peps would say is like this would be a really good routine to start with.
But I did love, as you've already said, that you have to be consistent with those routines and accept that they will take time. Like, you standing up and go, well, this is the routine for this, is not a silver bullet. It's not then automatically going to be like fantastic from that point on. But yeah, really, really great session.
2 more to go. Mary Myatt's session has just ended. Amy, do you want to give us a quick summary of what it was about and kind of what your main thoughts are just after it's finished are?
Yeah, so Mary's session was titled Curriculum is for the Teacher. And for me, actually, this was a very novel way of looking at how curriculums work. The main thing that I've kind of taken away from this is she talked a lot about the quality of resources that we use with our students. She talked about how with those resources we should be what she called privileging thinking over task completion. So it's not about like the basic handout that means they do some task, but actually really thinking about the resources that we use. And she actually connected that as well to professional learning for teachers. So this idea that actually we can use the curriculum and the resources that we find to present those ideas or that curriculum content to increase our own sort of subject knowledge and understanding of what we're teaching. And then, you know, if we've learned more, we're more comfortable with the content, we're more inspired by it, we're then going to pass that inspiration and motivation on to our students. And I guess within that to, you know, sort of not be afraid of the kind of challenging resources and the high level tasks that can come from that, even if, you know, perhaps sometimes it seems like some of the material might be beyond the sort of grasp of that current group. Actually, we should be pushing them towards that and showing them how we have learned as well.
And she also got me thinking about just being able to challenge myself in saying, have I chosen this resource, this question, picture, whatever, because I think it's beautiful, is what Mary was saying, or have I chosen it because I think it will be fine, it will do. And there's a place for it will do, there's a place for it will be fine. But sometimes it's good to take a step back and go, no, like, why have I chosen this image? Have I chosen it because it is inspiring? Because if not, maybe I should question why I'm using it. And there might be a valid reason, but it's always good to question that. I think Mary's got me thinking about that. Curriculum's for the teacher. The teacher, not just the student.
Finding something in it for you as the teacher that inspires you. You know, there's especially for us as secondary teachers, like there's a reason why you teach the subject that you do. Like we love our subjects. So finding those bits in each of the sort of topic areas that are the bits that you love, that inspire you, and then celebrating that and passing it on to our students.
Yeah, I find it hard in maths with histograms. I hate histograms so much. You've got
to find the joy and the beauty in the histogram, Arthur.
Listeners, if there's a joy in histogram, please at TandTeaching on Twitter, because I am yet to find it. The last one.
Final session, here we go.
And the final session has just finished, Amy. We've taken a moment to reflect upon all the sessions, and this is the last one. Doug Lemov talking all about cold calling, wait times, thinking and participation ratios. Big name. What did you think? Big name.
Oh, this was such a good session. I've taken so many ideas from this that it is going to be difficult for us to cram into a 3-minute summary. So Doug started off talking about how basically we need some stress in order to create learning. By stress, that might mean different things to different people. Perhaps we mean challenge, but we need that for kind of optimum performance for our students.
Which is why I've limited you to 3 minutes to sum this up, so you've got that stress of doing it well.
I've got the stress, on me to perform. And then, he's been talking about cold calling, showed us some examples, ways about getting students to prepare for cold calling, and then kind of a cold call starter kit, I think, as he called it.
For me, there was one thing that he said that really stood out, and it's kind of my main note I have taken, as he was, again, little things that make a big difference. And in the videos Doug showed, and when he was cold calling us as the audience, there was points where him and the teachers in the videos were just saying, get ready for some questions. Watch this video, get ready for some questions. Read this, get ready for some questions. I think that is a lovely line, get ready for some questions. I just think it's a beautiful phrase to use, and I'm going to be using that going forward. What about for you? Any other kind of mini thoughts?
Yeah, I love my mini thoughts. I loved the idea of that, like a way of preparing students for cold calling. I love just how he talked about cold calling anyway. He kept referring to it as an invitation to join the conversation. So it's about showing that we care about our students, we care about their voice, their participation. We want, to encourage what he called voice equity. So everyone's voice is equally as important and is equally as valued in the classroom. One of the other things I loved that he talked about, I'm really struggling to just pin it to one idea. He talked about something that as another way of preparing for cold calling that was actually more on you as the teacher, was if you have set your students off on, say, a short independent task, that you go round and do what he called hunting for the things that you're going to cold call on later. So he showed us a video where a teacher was walking around and made a couple of notes about like some vocabulary that a student used, or you could perhaps use it for a particular misconception that you might want to address. But so that almost like you're planning your cold calling, or at least it seems to the students like it's cold calling as you're going round, but actually you're then through that process being able to pick up on things that are going to benefit everybody in the room.
I think I've said on the pod before, I just think questioning I think it might be the thing as a teacher, and just Doug's session was just filled with these, just so many little things, and we've given you a couple things here. Unfortunately, we can't give you them all because that would be the next couple of hours. But really go away and think about cold calling. Go away, think about it. Doug was saying this is not just a one thing fits every situation. This will not work for every single class in every single context, but you can adapt and you can use it.
And it's beneficial to put our students in that, quote, stressful situation sometimes, and if you can make it like a social norm that everyone gets called, going back to some of the other sessions today, that everyone gets called on, it's a routine, it's what's expected, then actually it's going to go A, a lot smoother, and B, it's going to have a lot more impact.
Absolutely.
I'm here with Peps, who has just finished his talk here at the Teacher and Learning Summit. Peps, how do you feel it went? How were the audience today?
Oh, it's a wonderful place to be. You know, what an incredible building, an incredible
It's
kind
lovely,
of like, you know, cultural epicenter to be presenting at. So massively grateful. And yeah, it was just, you know, hugely honoured to spend a bit of time talking to the educators in the room about the unintuitive nature of education. I think there are so many ideas that just aren't obvious, that are almost deeply counterintuitive, that, you know, it's so important for us to try and wrap our heads around, so that we can give our learners that kind of the best that they deserve, as it were.
It's those things that you think are obvious, and then when you actually go away and learn about it, you're like, oh, the thing I thought was obvious isn't just unobvious, it's fundamentally wrong.
Right, absolutely.
And it's like we have to be very aware to kind of educate ourselves around those things, and that's what your session was all about.
I think
really.
so. Like, teaching is basically one of these jobs that, you know, might look easy on the surface, but actually the more you dig into it, the more complex and kind of like unobvious it becomes. And so
reminds me of my NQT years, where I was like, I've been teaching for 6 weeks, I've nailed it, like, this is easy.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a moment, mate, it's not that easy. My question that I'd written down during your session was, we know sometimes like routines are hard to build into classroom, these kind of norms. Do you have like a go-to routine that you recommend a teacher kind of implements in their kind of, in a really challenging classroom? What's a really easy routine to get that quick and easy win?
Yeah, well, I think one of the kind of best places to start is around whole class questioning. We're also going to have Doug Lemov chatting today about cold call and wait times, and I think those are some like really kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of routines that you can build into your lesson that have a massive impact on the amount of attention that students pay in your lessons and the number of students that pay that amount of attention. And what we know about learning from the world of cognitive science is what our students attend to is what they end up learning. And so when you kind of like have a force multiplier like cold call operating on the amount of attention that gets paid in the classroom, you just basically boost the kind of amount of learning that happens as a result. So that's my advice, is like, go find out about what a really effective cold call looks like. You can do that by checking out Doug's work or Brad's work, you know, at Inner Drive, and basically take it from there.
And I think we should also plug Evidence Snacks, because it is genuinely, it's an absolute brilliant email. So please, Peps, you can plug it better than I can.
If you're a teacher interested in keeping up with the evidence in just 5 minutes a week, then sign up to Evidence Snacks, and you can just find it on the internet just by typing in Evidence Snacks or Peps. Luckily I have a fairly unique name, so it should be hard to find.
You get your own folder in my inbox, Peps. They all go in there, and then I can read them when I go, need some CPD in my life.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers, Arthur.
I'm here with Doug Lemov, who's just finished his session today. Doug, how did it go?
It was great from my perspective. Super group of teachers, just really insightful and energetic and eager to talk about the craft of teaching, which that's my happy place.
Yeah, and you called out my wife, Amy, who was in the Nirvana t-shirt.
Oh, she crushed it.
Yeah, she did actually.
Yeah.
Luckily, you didn't go to me, otherwise it would have been a very uncrushing moment.
Well, if you had worn a Nirvana t-shirt, you might have had a fighting chance.
Well, that's where I've been going wrong all these days. So, as you can hear, like, there's a lot of buzz on in the background at the moment. People are leaving the day. What's the one thing you're hoping someone left your session with thinking, that's what I've gone away taking from Doug's session today?
So one thing that I hope people would take away is just the power of routines, and especially routines for the core ways that students participate in class, the way they answer questions. It's really like the most important thing in shaping students' experience in the classroom. And being systematic and building routines around those things is so critical in helping students succeed. So turn and talk and cold call and everybody writes, building those into the fabric of your classroom, they really can tip the entire culture in a positive way.
And questioning cold calling, it's one of those things where these tiny little changes you make, and they make these huge differences.
That's what I love about we were talking about the phrase get us started. So if you cold call a student and you say, Arthur, what's the answer, right? That's really hard. I have to know the whole answer. But if I give you a little bit of time to prepare, maybe talk with a partner, and then I say, Arthur, get us started. What did you and your partner talk about? Right now I've lowered the stakes. I've made it easy for you to be successful. Just, the subtleties of language change and shape interactions. And I think that's kind of the part that I love of the work, is thinking about the details of what takes something from meh to beautiful.
And as you said, just questioning is one of those things that you make these little changes, and every single lesson you get a little bit better at it. Yeah. And then suddenly, months down the line, you suddenly realise, wow, look at what we've created.
Yeah, you can see it. One of the videos we showed was of math teacher Janarius Frazier. He says, get ready for some questions and smiles in this playful way at students. And
It's a beautiful moment.
Yeah, it's a beautiful moment.
Especially the maths stuff. I'm all on board as a maths teacher, and kids always get chords wrong. Always. It's one of those things. Always
Has to
chords wrong.
happen,
Anyway, Doug, thank you so much for your time today. Session was absolutely brilliant. So
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's coming towards the end of the day now at the Inner Drive and Eton Teaching and Learning Summit of 2024. We've had a bunch of amazing speakers. I'm here with Busch, one of the organisers of the event. Brad, how's the day been?
Yeah, it's been amazing seeing so many brilliant presenters all come together and share their thoughts and ideas, and more importantly, having so many educators and teachers all give up a Saturday to all be in one place to discuss and debate how we do education better. It's been great.
Is there anything that really stands out for you when you go home tonight and, I don't know, sit on the sofa and have a beer or whatever? What will be that one thing that's kind of still going on in your brain?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that Pep said, which I thought was really interesting, was how sometimes like stuff seems really simple to do, but when you're working in a very complex environment, which education is, it takes quite a lot of thought and nuance. And I thought there's a lot of the talks overlapping with each other's and building on it. And what seems really simple at the start, when you dig into the detail, there's a lot of nuance there, but often that's where I think there's big gains to be made. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear everyone's thoughts on it.
And like anything, when you're just surrounded by people who are passionate and interested in what they do, you leave feeling passionate and interested about what you do, and that's what stuff like this is all about.
Yeah, and like so much so every one of the presenters, not only do they have really interesting things to say, but like they've dedicated their life to this thing that they really believe in, and you can't help but feel like, how can I do my job better? And not because we're not good enough, but because there's so much amazing stuff that we can do. And seeing the energy of them, and also some of the questions from the crowd and the discussion makes you think that like this is a really precious opportunity to do some good in the world. So hopefully it did.
No, it's just awesome. So I can't imagine people are listening to this and don't know about Inner Drive, but there's that one person who maybe is. Listen, God, Inner Drive, they sound all right, innit? What do they do, Brad?
We are all right, innit?
I think that's the tagline, right? Yeah. Where do they go? What do they type into Google? What do they find out?
Yeah, so our website's innerdrive.co.uk. We try and make research illuminating. We try and make our training interactive and hopefully do some inspiring along the way. We do our workshops for CPD, we do student stuff, but the thing we're really proud of at the moment is our Teacher CPD Academy. It's like a one-stop shop for teaching and learning resources for schools and colleges. And if anyone's listening and would like a free trial and demo, get in touch, send us an email to info@innerdrive.co.uk. You should probably know that. And we'll be able to get you a free trial.
Perfect. And also just a shout out to Eton, who have been awesome hosts today. It's just been a beautiful event, hasn't it?
Yeah, they are brilliant to work with. I think the venue is obviously stunning. The amount of stuff that they share for free and some of the resources that they were signposting people towards, brilliant to work with. Can't praise them enough. And hopefully, as a result, we've done some good in the world.
What a lovely way to end.
A lovely way.
Doing some good stuff in the world. Anyway, Brad, enjoy your evening, enjoy the rest of your weekend, because I think you've earned a bit of a sit down.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming and helping out.
Hello listeners, it's now Sunday the 11th of February. It's about 24 hours since we got back from the conference yesterday, Amy, and I'm just wondering, you've had a bit more time, or we've had a bit more time to kind of process the sheer amount of information we took in. I'm just wondering for your overall thoughts on the day itself and kind of that one thing you're going to take into school tomorrow morning.
Yeah, it was. It's just such a brilliant day. It's always great to get together with other teachers and then to have these like experts in the room with just these brilliant insights and suggestions. I think for me, the thing that I'm going to be going into school with on Monday, I've got a week just before I head into half term, is actually going to be taken from Amarbeer Singh Gill's session on interleaving. Thinking particularly about the concepts and ideas in a poetry GCSE unit that I'm currently teaching with Year 10. I've been trying to sort of interleave in that unit with them already, but actually from Amarbeer's session, I just want to go and have a look at that planning again and think about, the order of poems that I'm teaching, and actually what might be best to kind of establish those theme connections, which is what they need for going into the exam. But yeah, such a brilliant day. I've taken so much away from it. How about you?
Very similar to you. I think overall, I think going to these conferences is important because you learn a lot. We've learned a lot. But I think it's also important, and I always get the sense whenever we go to these kind of educational conferences or chats or meetups, is it's so nice to be surrounded by people who are openly passionate about what they do and just want to get better. When just chatting with people, like I always try and ask like why are you here? And so many times people going, oh yeah, well, like I'm here because I want to be here, not because I've been sent by my trust or by my school or my boss. Like I want to be here because I want to get better at what I'm passionate about doing.
I am willingly giving up my Saturday.
Yeah. And there's the real pride in that, and that's something we should take pride in as educators. And I always come away from these sessions, and especially within a drive, of just kind of being like, there's so many teachers who are passionate about what they do and are brilliant at what they do.
Very lucky in this profession in terms of like our colleagues. Like it's, let's acknowledge teaching is hard work. It is a tough job, but there are so many people out there working so hard to make schools great places and to do the best for their students.
And then the thing I think I'm really going to take away from this specific conference is, for me, it was kind of a combination of a lot of the sessions, but I'm going to point out Peps's and Doug's, of kind of building this whole cold calling better into my routines and norms, and kind of combining those two. I'm really passionate about questioning. I find it probably the most interesting facet of teaching, but I think what Doug's really got me going into the minutiae of my language and my syntax when I'm talking, and then Peps has got me think about how I can actually take that and go even further with it and build that into the norms of my classroom or my students or wherever I'm working with people. So that's what I'm really kind of going away and think about, and I think that's going to take a few more kind of weeks to process.
I love that about these kind of things though, where it hasn't just given me this one little thing, like this is weeks and months worth of development and things that we can now implement, and hopefully some of the listeners will have got some ideas that they can try out as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I hope today, the whole point of this pod was just to give you an idea, a kind of insight into what the Inner Drive and Eton Teacher and Learning Summit of 2024 was all about. So I hope you've got that. I hope it's got you thinking. Please go and check out the Inner Drive website. They've had loads of shout outs. I'm not going to give them any more. Eton had loads of shout outs because it was a lovely day.
It was a brilliant day.
Really enjoyed it. But go and check out the speakers. And do you know what? Go and sign up for an educational conference. Go and talk to your teacher and learn lead and be like, I want to do this. Can you support me in doing this? Because you'll get so much out of it.
So much. And hopefully we'll see some of these listeners next year then, 2025.
Hopefully. And we should also shout out, Amy, your first kind of big pod, I think, that's going out with your name on it. So thank you.
I feel like I did that really well.
Yeah, I was texting Mike all day being like he was, how's she doing? We were talking about that behind your back.
I don't want to brag, but Bradley Busch did call me an upgrade from Mike Harrowell. So
well, there's only one way to find out if Mike listens to this pod. If he replies to that, listeners, it's been an absolute pleasure. If you want to share your experiences of the summit, please go on Twitter at TandTeaching, or you can at Inner Drive. Let us know how the day went for you. But thank you so much, and we'll speak to you next time.